Hello, I'm Scott Woodwiss and welcome to highlights of the 2013 Thrustmaster Formula SimRacing World Championship. Round 5 sees the teams head to Montreal for the Canadian Grand Prix. Located on the Ile Notre Dame on the St. Lawrence River, the circuit Gilles Villeneuve provides a combination of long straights with a variety of chicanes and a hairpin. As a result, brake cooling and aerodynamic balance is key, and the close confines of the walls gives the circuit a distinctly street feel. Nevertheless, it's a track that remains a favourite with the drivers. The key to a quick lap in Montreal is the ability to ride the curves, and in qualifying no one did that better than Morgan Morand, as he put his go speed on pole for the second time this season. Championship rival Bono Huis would join him on the front row, while row 2 was made up by Martin Gosby and Jerne Simoncic, both showing a brilliant turn of pace. World Championship debutant Marek Godek lined up an impressive 5th for Pescara as he stood in for FSR veteran Lee Morris, who was due to make a one-off appearance here in Canada but was forced to withdraw due to illness. Patrick de Wit managed 6th despite struggling with his Netrex's single lap pace. Ivar Kalames could do no better than 7th for precision ahead of Filip Puška in 8th, and Dejan Kostadinov and Ville Lapala rounded out the top 10. Gergo Baldi marked his return with 11th for Brem GP, ahead of an off-the-pace Jack Keithley in 12th. The twister cars of Eduard Mallorqui and Rasmus Tali would start 13th and 15th, surrounding Biocross Positive's Marcel van der Linden, with teammate Blair Disley starting at the back of the grid after failing to set a time. Off the start, Morand's launch left him with too much wheel spin, allowing Huis to get ahead of the Frenchman on the run down to turn 1. Gosby tried to look around the outside, but ran too deep and had to settle for 3rd. Exiting turn 2, Huis had the lead from Morand and Gosby, as the field safely negotiated the opening corners. With several cars battling for track position at once, a mistake from Tali saw him take a trip across the grass at turn 4, before Simoncic made an error a few corners later, and a run through the gravel dropped the Slovenian from 4th to 8th. The end of lap 1 had the top 3 pulling away at an alarming rate, with de Wit giving chase in 4th ahead of Godek, Kalames, Baldi, Simoncic, Puška and Keithley. On the following lap, Huis was coming under substantial pressure from Morand, whose lower downforce setup was helping him gain an advantage down the straights. Morand attempted a pass into the final chicane, but Huis had the inside line covered. Using the slipstream down the pit straight, Morand easily pulled alongside the precision, and into turn 1 Huis was forced to outbrake himself, handing the place to Morand and narrowly avoiding losing 2nd to Martin Gosby. It didn't take long for the race to claim its first casualty, when Peter Varga missed his braking point fighting for position and took a wild ride across the final chicane. The resulting damage to his Brem GP car saw him as an instant retirement. There was more drama into the hairpin on lap 3, when Moises Rondon hit the rear of Dejan Kostadinov's Netrex, causing damage to both cars. Eros Mescudi would arrive on the scene seconds later and clip Kostadinov's errant rear wing, forcing the Italian to limp back to the pits with a puncture. Marek Godek's first race for Pescara began to come unstuck when a small slide exiting turn 7 allowed Filip Puška to sweep around the outside of the young Slovakian for 8th one corner later. Jack Keithley would then try to do the same into turn 1, but late braking forced him wide, allowing Godek to retain 9th. Keithley tried again into the final chicane 2 laps later and made the move stick to take the place, before Twister's Eduard Mallorqui pulled off a classy outside pass through turn 1 to push Godek down to 10th. Ville Lapala was the next to pass at the same spot a lap later for 11th position, and to add to Godek's suffering, Rasmus Tali made a move into the final chicane to take yet another place from the Pescara. After starting 5th, Godek now found himself down to 13th place. Back at the front, Huis had stayed close to Morand through the opening laps, and on the approach to the hairpin, Huis pounced up the inside of the go speed for the lead. With the pair running side by side on the exit, Morand just edged himself in front, but Huis made sure he was tucked under Morand's rear wing down the casino straight. Into the final chicane, Huis again braked later than his rival, and completed the pass to take the lead. Morand would dive for the pits on the following lap to make the first of what would turn out to be a 5-stop strategy. Despite a quick stop, Morand's exit left him slotting between the fight for 7th between Keithley and Mallorqui. While Mallorqui had to give way to the Frenchman, Morand crucially lost time trying to get around Keithley, and eventually made the pass around the outside at the hairpin. Just ahead, Woodwiss was making his first of 3 scheduled stops, 2 fewer than Morand's strategy suggested. He rejoined in 5th, but more importantly did so ahead of Morand and with a small gap. This momentarily put Martin Gosby in the lead, but a scary moment exiting turn 9 almost ended his race before he'd even reached his first stop. After Gosby pitted, it left Patrick de Wit out in front for Netrex, but he soon came under pressure from sister teammate Gergo Baldi. Their battles allowed Woodwiss and Morand to close, and on lap 14, Woodwiss dived past the Brem GP and into second. Moments later, his attempts to pass de Wit at the hairpin nearly came unstuck, when the Netrex moved across and locked up to avoid an incident. Down the back straight, de Wit had to resist more pressure from Baldi, but heading towards the chicane, de Wit made a desperate dive for the pits, but couldn't slow down in time. He lost control, narrowly avoiding an incident with Woodwiss and losing his front wing against the wall. His pit crew were unable to correctly fit a new nose cone, which forced de Wit to drive an entire lap with no front wing. And amazingly, de Wit made the same last-minute dive to pit lane again, this time almost taking out Rasmus Tali as he moved past Jack Keithley for 9th. After the initial round of stops, Woodwiss and Morand became locked in a battle for the lead, with the gap quickly reducing to less than a second. Martin Gosby remained in touching distance in 3rd after a dominating performance in the World Series race the day before. Jurnej Simoncic and Filip Puška duly swapped places for 4th and 5th due to Ash Racing's association as a satellite team of GoSpeed. A battle for 6th soon occurred between Lapala, Calamaze and the charging Gergo Baldi. After being one of the last drivers to make their first stop, Baldi quickly caught and passed Calamaze at the hairpin, and further around the following lap did the same to Lapala at turn 8. Rasmus Tali looked on in 9th position, and Jack Keithley was frustrated and off the pace in 10th. If GT Omega thought Keithley was struggling, they were about to get a rude awakening, when Martin Gosby took too much curb at turn 9 and clipped the wall. With his front wing missing and a puncture to contend with, Gosby struggled towards the pit, but as he approached pit entry, the battle for 6th caught up, and their arrival caught Gosby completely off guard, causing him to hit the wall again. Gosby lost his rear wing and was almost collected by Marek Godek before retiring on the spot. During this time, Morand had closed onto the gearbox of Woodwiss, and on lap 24, a run down the Casino Straight allowed Morand to snatch the lead before the final chicane. Woodwiss kept close on the exit and into turn 1 attempted to repass, with the pair running side by side through 1 and 2 and Morand coming out on top. Running nose to tail for the next few corners, Woodwiss again made a dive into the hairpin and briefly retook the lead, but better traction from Morand allowed him to power past once more, before the GoSpeed headed for the pits for the second time. Woodwiss made his second stop a lap later, but a stunning outlap by Morand allowed him to grab the lead and a small gap by the time Woodwiss rejoined. Immediately it became clear that Woodwiss had chosen the harder compound, as Morand began to pull away at the rate of around a second per lap on the softs. By half distance, Morand had a 10-second advantage over Woodwiss. Filip Puška was holding steady in 3rd and looking likely to make it a double podium for GoSpeed. Ville Lapala and Rasmus Tali were in 4th and 5th, but yet to make their second stops, while Jurnej Simoncic hunted them down in 6th. Gergo Baldi was looking odds-on for a strong points finish, but when Filip Puška caught the Brem GP at the hairpin, too much throttle forced the Hungarian into a spin. Baldi couldn't keep the engine running and was forced out of what had promised to be a great result for him and his team. Lap 40 saw Morand make his 3rd stop with a 12-second advantage over Woodwiss. Incredibly, thanks to some super driving in the 3rd stint, Morand was able to rejoin just ahead of the precision to maintain his lead, but knowing that he would have to pit twice more and Woodwiss only once, meant this duel was set to carry on all the way to the flag. Patrick de Wit had overcome his earlier troubles, and by lap 44 had worked his way into 9th place. Under braking for the chicane, de Wit's car snapped sideways, allowing the chasing Blair Disley an opportunity to pass. The pair sprinted down the pit straight together, and as they negotiated turn 1, both drivers got out of shape, allowing de Wit to hold the place before pitting at the end of the lap. Morand's 4th stop came on lap 50, with the Frenchman once again making it out in front of Woodwiss to maintain his position at the front. It was a clear indication that GoSpeed had the measure of precision in this race, and despite playing a strategy forcing 2 more stops than Woodwiss, Morand was the one with the upper hand. Behind them, the other precision of Eduard Calamaze was under attack from Jurnej Simoncic, with the Ash Racing driver outdragging the Estonian down the pit straight to steal 5th. Shortly afterwards, Bono Woodwiss would make his 3rd and final stop of the race, bolting on another set of hard tyres and now able to push hard all the way to the finish in his pursuit of Morgan Morand. This prompted a flurry of activity in pit lane as several drivers made their final stops. Eduard rejoined from his in between Jack Keithley and Rasmus Tarley, with the trio running nose to tail for the entire lap. Ash Racing decided to stack both cars, with SimRacing stopping ahead of Lapala. As the Finns crew got to work, Jack Keithley entered pit lane, but as the Brit dived for his pit box, Lapala was released straight into the GT Omega's path, causing a collision between the two cars. Keithley's engine stalled, and for the second race in a row, GT Omega would leave Canada with 0 points. The closing stages would really see the race begin to come alive. Patrick de Wit lost 9th place to a classy outside pass from Marcel van der Linden before the Biocross driver began to cause headaches for Pescara's Marek Godek. Villa Lapala would then dampen Ash Racing spirits when too much curb at turn 8 forced the Finn to nudge the wall and stall his car, leaving him out from 6th place. Perhaps karma had come back to bite him after the earlier incident with Keithley. Blair Disley would also fall victim to an outside pass from Eduard Mallorqui, whose careful tyre management had helped the Spaniard move into 8th after an early stop had dropped him down the field. Then came crunch time. Morgan Morand entered pit lane with 9 laps to go for his 5th and final stop. Incredibly, for the 3rd time, Ghost Speed's pitwork saw the Frenchman come out in front of Woodwiss. Both drivers were now on hard tyres, but Morand's were fresher and more importantly, he had track position. The battle for victory was on. However, neither of them had counted on one particular driver coming back to haunt them. Patrick de Wit had made a late stop for tyres and had quickly caught up to the pair just as Morand had left the pits. De Wit stayed close and watched on, as on lap 64, Woodwiss briefly challenged at the hairpin to no avail. Exiting the final chicane, Woodwiss had Morand exactly where he wanted him and tried an outside pass into turn 1. Morand held his line, forcing Woodwiss wide, but keeping his foot in, Woodwiss muscled his way through into the lead, pushing Morand wide and unbelievably allowing de Wit pass to unlap himself. Morand appeared helpless as de Wit then had the audacity to challenge Woodwiss at the hairpin. Having failed on his first attempt, de Wit tried again at the chicane and forced his way through. The move unsettled Woodwiss on the exit, and as Morand tried to capitalise on his mistake, Woodwiss drifted into the Frenchman's path. Morand was left with nowhere to go and speared his Ghost Speed into the outside wall. The collision wiped out his front wing and suspension, and a speechless Morgan Morand saw victory escape him just a handful of laps before the finish. With no more drama in the remaining laps, Bono Woodwiss calmly came out on top to secure his 3rd Canadian Grand Prix victory, equalling the record set by David Greco. Or had he? The timing system suffered a technical problem on the final lap, and as Woodwiss crossed the line on track, his race time failed to register. When he did reappear on the timing screens, he was shown as 11th and a non-finisher. But after a short discussion, the race stewards gave Woodwiss the victory due to being the first man past the checkered flag. But Precision's celebrations were premature, as shortly afterwards Woodwiss was punished for his part in both incidents with Morand on lap 65. He was handed 2 penalty points on his licence, and more importantly, a 60-second time penalty added on to his race time. Because of this, Woodwiss lost his victory and was demoted to 4th. As a result, it became a weekend of firsts. Ghost Speed's Filip Puška was handed his first World Championship victory after a brilliant drive to avoid the chaos. Ivar Kalamay scored his 4th podium in a row in 2nd and was classified ahead of Woodwiss for the first time since the pair became teammates. And an ecstatic Jurnej Simončić claimed his first WC podium with the final step on the rostrum. As mentioned, Woodwiss was relegated to 4th, making it his first finish off the podium since the Belgian Grand Prix last year. The positions below him remained the same, with the biggest cheers reserved for Biocross Positive, whose good fortune saw Marcel van der Linden finish 5th ahead of Twister's Eduard Mallorqui in 6th, and Blair Disley drove a stellar race to finish 7th despite starting at the back of the grid. A messy afternoon for Patrick de Wit meant he could do no better than 8th, and Marek Godek scored points on his debut for Pescara ahead of teammate Eros Mesculi, who crossed the finish line backwards after a last corner incident with Jasko PSR's Zuhait's Cabo. Mesculi was initially classified behind the Spaniard, but reinstated in 10th after the race. In the Drivers' Championship, Bono Woodwiss remains in the lead on 87 points. Morand's misfortunes have seen him lose 2nd in the standings to Calamay's, and Puška's victory moves him to 4th, just 2 points behind his teammate. Keithley, de Wit and Nilsson have all dropped a place, while Simicic's podium lifts him 2 spots to 8th. Kostadinov also loses a place to 9th, and Eduard Mallorqui breaks into the top 10 for the first time, despite only racing twice this season. The constructors remain largely unchanged, with Precision still sitting pretty at the top. GoSpeed have now joined them as the second team to break the 100-point barrier, while Twister have increased their gap to 4th place NetRex to 8 points. GT Omega and Brem GP remain level in 5th, with Ash Racing now just 4 points behind in 7th thanks to Simitic's podium. Biocross are now tied with Pescara for 8th, and Fast and Speed and Jasco Spain PSR remain at the bottom of the table. The next round is the British Grand Prix at Silverstone, and you can watch that race live as it happens. Just head to simrace.tv on June the 16th, with qualifying at 4:15 GMT and the race at 5 o'clock. Until then, make sure to sign up to the FSR Fantasy League for your chance to win Thrustmaster prizes at fantasy.formula-simracing.net. As usual, you can visit our forums at racedepartment.com for more league information, and, as always, follow FSR on both Facebook and on Twitter. We hope you've enjoyed today's highlights. I'm Scott Woodwiss, and we'll see you next time for round 6 of the 2013 Thrustmaster Formula Sim Racing World Championship.